Admiral Kess stood on the observation deck of the Galactic Unity command vessel, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger through the reinforced viewport. Behind her, representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy sat in tents. Silence around the War Council table. The reptilian hegemony, the crystal communes, the gas giant collectives, the silicon mines all had set aside millennia of territorial disputes for this singular purpose. "How many ships?" asked Commander Vale, his forearms crossed in the traditional pose of the Insectoid Federation. 12,000 vessels, Kess replied, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. Every functional warship from every member world, the largest armada in galactic history. The human homeworld looked so peaceful from this distance, spinning slowly in the void with its white clouds and green continents. It was hard to believe that this small planet had managed to conquer half the galaxy in less than 2 centuries. Not through superior technology, the humans were still using primitive fusion drives when they first left their system. Not through overwhelming numbers, they were barely 1% of the galactic population. They conquered through something else entirely. "Remember," Kess continued, turning to face the assembled commanders, "humans don't fight like us. They don't follow the codes of honorable warfare. They don't respect surrender protocols. When cornered, they become—" She paused, searching for the right word in galactic standard. "Unpredictable." Commander Vex of the Crystalline Collective resonated with skeptical harmonics. "They are mammals. Biological entities driven by emotion and instinct. Our tactical computers have run 12 million simulations. Victory probability, 97.4%. Kess had heard similar confidence before, from the Outer Rim Alliance when humans first expanded beyond their moon. From the Trade Federation when Earth refused to pay tribute taxes. From the warrior clans of Axton when they declared humanity would make excellent slaves. All of them were now under human administration. "Sir," her aide approached with a data pad. "Long-range sensors detect movement on the planet's surface. They're launching something." Every eye, sensor array, and psychic projection focused on the tactical display. A single vessel rose from Earth's surface, not one of their feared battleships or carrier fleets. Just a small diplomatic shuttle, painted white with blue markings. "They want to talk," muttered Vale. "It's a trick," Vex chimed, her crystalline form pulsing with agitation. "Humans always want to talk before they attack. It's how they conquered the meditation worlds." The shuttle approached slowly, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Captain Reed of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, requesting permission to come aboard and address the coalition." Kess felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had studied every human military engagement for the past 50 years. This was how it always started, with a human walking into an impossible situation with nothing but words and an inexplicable smile. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. "Permission granted," Kess heard herself say, though every instinct screamed against it. "Dock in Bay 7. 20 minutes later, Captain Reed stepped onto their command deck. He was unremarkable by human standards, medium height, brown hair going gray. At the temples, wearing a simple blue uniform with no visible weapons. But he carried himself with that particular human confidence that had unnerved galaxy leaders for generations. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Reed said, his translator rendering his words in perfect galactic standard. "I know you've come a long way." Commander Vale's mandibles clicked aggressively. "We've come to accept your surrender, human." Reed smiled, that infuriating human expression that somehow conveyed amusement, sadness, and determination all at once. "Actually, I came to offer you ours." The command deck fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Admiral Kess felt her secondary heart skip a beat as Reed's words processed through the universal translators again, as if the machines themselves couldn't believe what they'd heard. You ... surrender? Commander Vale's voice carried the clicking undertone that indicated severe confusion in his species. Reed nodded, his hands clasped behind his back in the relaxed posture humans adopted when delivering the impossible. Unconditionally, Earth formally surrenders to the Galactic Coalition. Vex's crystalline form shimmered with what could only be described as digital laughter. This is obviously a deception. Humans don't surrender. Our databases contain over 3,000 instances of human forces fighting to the last individual. Rather than yield. You're right, Reed agreed. We don't usually surrender, but today is different. Kess studied the human's face, searching for the trap she knew had to be there. In her decades of military service, she had learned to read the subtle expressions of dozens of species. But humans remained frustratingly opaque, their emotions flowing across their features like water. What changed? She asked. Reed walked to the observation port, his gaze settling on Earth below. We finally understood what you were trying to tell us. That we don't belong among the stars. That we're too violent, too unpredictable, too ... double quotes he paused. Too human. The coalition commanders exchanged glances, or the equivalent, among their various species. This was not how the simulations had predicted this encounter would unfold. So you admit it, growled Bane, the representative from the Predator worlds. You admit that humans are a plague upon the galaxy. We are what we are, Reed replied. The question is what happens next. Admiral Kess felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always preceded a human revelation. What do you mean? Reed turned from the viewport, and for the first time, his expression carried genuine sadness. We've prepared surrender documents for every human world. 47 colonies, 32 mining operations, 18 research stations. All of them will stand down and submit to coalition authority within the next 72 hours. And Earth? Asked Vale. Earth will be evacuated. The silence stretched longer this time. Even the ship's computer system seemed to pause, as if processing an impossible equation. Evacuated? Kess managed. Reed nodded. 7 billion humans. We've been building transport ships for the past 6 months, ever since we detected your fleet. Movements. Generational ships designed for deep space travel. We'll take our people beyond the galactic rim, far from any inhabited system. Vex's harmonics shifted to frequencies associated with deep suspicion. Humans don't retreat. They adapt, they improvise, they turn disadvantages into advantages. This is obviously a strategic withdrawal with some larger plan. No larger plan. Reed said quietly. Just 7 billion people accepting that maybe the galaxy is better off without them. Commander Vale leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the light in patterns that suggested intense concentration. You would abandon everything? Your homeworld, your colonies, your empire. To preserve peace? Yes. Kess felt something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine uncertainty. Every tactical manual, every strategic analysis, every psychological profile of humanity had prepared the coalition for human defiance, for desperate last stands, for the kind of impossible victories that had made humans the galaxy's most feared species, but no one had prepared them for human sacrifice. There has to be a catch, Bane insisted. Humans don't give up. Reed's smile returned, but this time it carried no hidden meanings, no strategic implications. Just the tired expression of someone who had made an impossibly difficult decision. The catch, General Bane, is that you'll spend the rest of your lives wondering if we could have been friends instead of enemies. The human captain moved toward the shuttle bay, pausing at the door. The evacuation begins in 72 hours. I suggest you start planning how to govern 47 human worlds without starting a civil war. As Reed disappeared down the corridor, Admiral Kess stared at the tactical display showing 12,000 Coalition warships surrounding a single, defenseless planet. For the first time in her military career, she wondered if they had already lost. The first reports came in 18 hours after Captain Reed's departure. Admiral Kess stood in the Coalition Command Center, watching display screens filled with impossible images from across human space. On New Plymouth, the colonial capital, humans were systematically shutting down their planetary defense grid. Not destroying it, not hiding it, but carefully powering down each installation and broadcasting the shutdown codes to Coalition monitoring stations. On the mining world of Iron Gate, human workers were completing their final ore shipments while posting detailed operational manuals in 17 different galactic languages on public networks. On Europa Station, the research hub that had produced humanity's most advanced technologies, scientists were uploading their complete databases to open-source galactic libraries. "They're actually doing it," muttered Commander Vale, his forearms hanging slack with disbelief. Vex resonated with confused harmonics. "Our psychological models didn't account for this behavior pattern. Humans don't abandon strategic positions. They fortify them." Admiral Kess watched the feeds from Earth itself, where massive construction ships were lifting off every few hours, their holds packed with evacuees. The vessels were crewed by galactic standards, essentially cargo containers, with life support and basic fusion drives. But they were numerous, and they were heading for the galactic rim at best possible speed. "Sir," her communications officer approached, "we're receiving transmissions from human colonies. Surrender documents, as promised." The data pad contained formal capitulation agreements from every human world, signed by their respective governors and transmitted with full authentication codes. But attached to each was something unexpected: detailed cultural briefings about the non-human populations on each world. "What's this?" Kess asked, highlighting one of the files. "Information about the gentlefolk communities on Harmony Prime." Her aide explained. "Apparently, there are over 2 million non-human refugees living on human worlds. The humans are requesting ... double quotes." He paused, checking the translation. "Requesting that we treat them kindly." Bane growled from his position near the tactical display. Probably spies and collaborators. But Kess was reading deeper into the files. The gentlefolk were refugees from the Crystal Wars, given sanctuary on human worlds when no one else would take them. The singing colonies were actually independent settlements of the Moth people, who had found human agricultural worlds hospitable for their young. The Deep Thinkers were a nomadic species that humans had simply allowed to settle wherever they wanted. "How many?" she asked. "Non-human populations on human worlds." "Approximately 800 million individuals from 347 different species." The number hit Kess like a physical blow. 800 million beings who had chosen to live under human administration rather than their own species' governments. "Sir," the communications officer continued, "we're also receiving what appear to be testimonials." "From whom?" "Everyone. The refugees, the colonists, the research partners. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." Kess activated the audio system, and the command center filled with voices. Thousands of them, speaking in hundreds of languages and dialects. A elderly tree singer. "The humans taught my grandchildren to speak with the Star Oaks. They said every voice should be heard." A crystal collective drone. "When my hive mind fractured, the humans helped me learn to think as an individual. They called it finding my own song." A deep ocean philosopher. "Humans dive deeper than any surface species should be able to. Not into water, into ideas, into possibilities, into the spaces between thoughts." Commander Vale's mandibles were clicking rapidly, his species equivalent of nervous laughter. "This is propaganda." "It has to be." But the testimonials kept coming. Species that had never spoken to each other were united in describing the same Thing, humans who listened, who adapted, who somehow made room for everyone. Admiral, Vex chimed urgently. Long-range sensors are detecting movement in the asteroid belt. Human ships changing course. Kes felt her pulse quicken. Here it was, the trap, the reversal, the typically human moment when defense became offense. Battle stations, she began, but stopped as the tactical display updated. The human ships weren't moving toward the coalition fleet. They were moving toward each other, forming up in defensive formations around the civilian transports. They're protecting the evacuation, Vale observed. No, Kes realized with growing certainty. They're saying goodbye. On the main screen, Earth continued to spin peacefully below them, its surface now dotted with the lights of millions of ascending transport ships, each one carrying humans away from the only home their species had ever known. And somehow, Admiral Kes felt like the 12,000 ships under her command were the ones retreating. Admiral Kes found herself in an unprecedented situation, commanding the largest military force in galactic history while watching her enemy pack up and leave. Voluntarily. The coalition fleet had spread throughout the Sol system, monitoring the human evacuation with growing unease. Status report, she called to her bridge crew. Earth's population is down to approximately 2 billion, her tactical officer reported. Transport ships are maintaining steady departures every 4 hours. No military escorts, no defensive postures. And the other human worlds? 43 colonies have completed full evacuation. 4 are still in progress. All planetary defense systems remain powered down. Commander Vale approached from his monitoring station, his expression unreadable even by insectoid standards. Admiral, we need to discuss the psychological reports. Kes accepted the datapad with reluctance. She had been dreading this update since the evacuation began. Our embedded observers on the evacuated worlds report widespread depression among coalition personnel assigned to take over human facilities. Vale continued. They're calling it inheritor's guilt. The report contained dozens of similar accounts. Coalition soldiers breaking down while touring human schools where multiple species learn together. Engineers weeping over human hospitals that treated any being regardless of their ability to pay. Administrators struggling to understand human. Cities where a dozen different architectural styles somehow created harmony instead of chaos. It gets worse, Vale said quietly. 3 of our garrison commanders have requested immediate reassignment. They say they can't bear to live in what they're calling ghost worlds. Kes scrolled through the testimonials, each one more disturbing than the last. Not because they described horrors, but because they described the opposite. Captain Hex of the Reptilian Hegemony. I found a human library with sections dedicated to the literature of 400 different species, including mine. They had better translations of our classical poetry than our own archives. Commander Stone of the Silicon Mines. Human cities have areas specifically designed for silicon-based beings, not segregated areas, integrated spaces, where digital consciousness could exist alongside biological life. They called it making room for everyone. How is this possible? Kes murmured. Our intelligence reports described humans as territorial, aggressive, expansionist. They were, Vale replied. But they were also adaptable. The communication system chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Captain Reed's face appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from what appeared to be one of the last transport ships. Admiral Kes, this is Captain Reed. I wanted to update you on our progress and address some concerns your personnel have raised. What concerns? Kes asked, though she suspected she knew. Your soldiers are having difficulty operating human infrastructure because it was designed for multi-species cooperation. We've prepared instruction manuals, but Reed paused, his expression carrying that peculiar human combination of pride and sadness. But the real issue isn't technical, it's philosophical. On the screen behind Reed, Kes could see humans loading the last of their possessions into transport containers. Families saying goodbye to homes they'd lived in for generations. Children clutching toys while their parents tried to explain why they had to leave. We designed our civilization around a simple idea, Reed continued, that everyone deserves a place to belong. It didn't matter if you breathed oxygen or methane, if you thought in mathematics or poetry, if you lived for decades or millennia. There was room. Commander Thex's harmonics shifted to frequencies associated with confusion. But you fought wars. You conquered territories. You displaced established civilizations. We did, Reed acknowledged. When those civilizations tried to deny that same belonging to others. The slave markets of Titan, the purity worlds that practiced genocide. The corporate states that treated sentient beings as resources. His voice hardened slightly. We fought to make room. Admiral Kes felt something shifting in her understanding of the past 2 centuries of galactic conflict. You weren't conquering. You were liberating. We were doing what we always do, Reed said simply. Making space for everyone to exist. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Around them, the Coalition fleet, 12,000 warships representing every major civilization in the galaxy, waited for orders that no longer seemed to make sense. Captain Reed, Kes asked carefully, what happens if we ask you to stay? Reed's smile was gentle but final. You won't. Because asking us to stay would mean admitting that maybe the galaxy needs what we offered. And that's a conversation your coalition isn't ready to have. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kes staring at a blank screen while around her, the most powerful military force in galactic history, struggled to understand how victory could feel so much like defeat. 3 weeks after the last human transport disappeared beyond the galactic rim, Admiral Kes stood in what had been the council chambers of New Geneva, Earth's capital. The massive hall, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of different species, now felt hollow despite being filled with coalition administrators. Status report, she called to the assembled officials. Governor Trace of the Outer Worlds stepped forward, his reports tablet trembling in his hands. Admiral, we have a problem, multiple problems. The litany of issues that followed painted a picture of systematic collapse across former human space. Not mechanical failures. Or sabotage, something far worse. The agricultural worlds are experiencing mass crop failures, Trace reported. Not because the humans damaged anything, but because their farming techniques were specifically designed to support multiple ecosystems simultaneously. Our farmers don't know how to maintain the balance. What about the industrial worlds? Kes asked. Production is down 70%. Human manufacturing was integrated across species lines. A single factory might have crystalline collective processing units, insectoid federation precision tools, and silicon mind quality control systems. No single species can operate the complete production chains. Commander Vale approached with his own tablet of disasters. The refugee populations are requesting relocation. They say they don't feel safe without human protection. Safe from what? Kes demanded. We're providing security. That's just it, Vale said quietly. They feel safe from us when humans were around. Now ... He gestured helplessly. 800 million beings from 347 species are asking to be relocated to ... somewhere else. But there is no somewhere else that will take them all. Thex resonated with frustrated harmonics. This is impossible. Civilizations don't collapse because one species leaves. Our economic models, our social dynamics, our political structures, they're all independent of human involvement. Are they? Kes asked, walking to the great windows that looked out over New Geneva's plaza. Below, she could see the remnants of human civilization. Parks designed for beings who breathed different atmospheres. Transportation systems that accommodated everything from massive silicon mines to tiny whisper folk. Architecture that somehow made space for species that lived underground, in the air, or in specialized environmental suits. And everywhere, empty. Spaces where humans used to be. Not empty because they had been removed, but empty because no one else knew how to fill the role they had played. "Ma'am," her aide approached hesitantly. "We're receiving reports from the outer colonies. Similar patterns everywhere. Systems shutting down, populations requesting relocation, infrastructure failing not from damage but from lack of integration." Admiral Kess turned back to the assembled officials. "How long before total collapse?" "At current rates, 6 months until major systems fail. 18 months until complete civilizational breakdown across all former human territories." The weight of realization settled over the chamber like a physical presence. The coalition had prepared for human resistance, for cunning traps, for desperate last stands. They had not prepared for the discovery that humans hadn't conquered the galaxy, they had been holding it together. "There's something else," Vale sighed reluctantly. "We've been monitoring long-range communications from the human fleet. And they're not stopping at the galactic rim. They're continuing into deep space, toward the void between galaxies." Kess felt her heart skip. "They're leaving permanently. It gets worse. Our xenobiologists have run projections on their destination. The intergalactic void is empty, cold, with no resources for colonization. At best, they have enough supplies for maybe 50 years of travel." The implications hung in the air like an accusation. The coalition had not just exiled humanity, they had sentenced them to death in the cold emptiness between stars. "Admiral," Vex chimed softly, "there may be one option. Which is, we could recall them. Send our fastest ships. Intercept their fleet, and ask them to come back." The suggestion was met with silence. Outside the windows, New Geneva's lights flickered as automated systems struggled to maintain themselves without the human oversight that had kept them running smoothly for decades. "And if they refuse?" Kess asked. "Then in 50 years, when the last human dies in the void between galaxies, we'll be left with the knowledge that we destroyed the only species that ever figured out how to make room for everyone." Admiral Kess looked around the chamber at the representatives of the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. A few weeks ago, they had been united in their certainty that humanity was a threat to galactic peace. Now, as their own colonies crumbled and their systems failed, they were beginning to understand a terrible truth. Perhaps the galaxy hadn't been united against Earth at all. Perhaps they had been united by Earth. And now, in the vast silence left by humanity's departure, they were finally learning what the universe sounded like. Without someone constantly working to make room for everyone else. It sounded like ending.